So good morning, everyone. Colleagues, thank you for coming bright and early on a lovely June Monday morning. We're going to continue an important discussion about the need for a new fiscal framework for the region of Waterloo. This is essential as we grow and work together to maintain sustainable service delivery and sound infrastructure investment within Waterloo region. I'd like to welcome MP Bardish Chagar, who is on her way, Tim Lewis, who is here, Valerie Bradford, who is here, and Mike Morris, who's on his way, as well as MPP Brian Riddell and Ashlyn Clancy for joining us. We have Bonita joining us from MPP Dixon's office and Dannon joining from MPP Fife's office. So again, thank you all for being here. I'd also like to welcome Lindsay Jones and Brian Rossborough from AMO to guide our discussion today, along with an incredible number of our outstanding leadership team. This is really a conversation about collaboration and how we best serve the needs of our growing community to ensure that we are 1 million ready. I want to start by acknowledging the land on which we gather today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Chinotan peoples. In doing this, I want to reflect on what it means to be doing important community work like we are engaging in collectively today, and also my own individual relationship to this land. As a settler, one of the most important aspects of my individual journey towards truth and reconciliation has been to listen. And I am continually grateful that the community continues to share their stories and their concerns with me. As well as the chair of the region, I know that I carry a large responsibility to ensure that it is not just myself as an individual ensuring listening and acting, but also as a government that we are listening and creating action in our community. I'm offering this acknowledgement as one of the many actions I am personally and the region largely is taking in our journey towards reconciliation. We acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous peoples with whom we share this land today, their achievements, and their contributions to our community. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest under the Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none, one small note before I turn the podium over to our acting CEO, Matthew Getsky, is that we have some future voters coming in as part of a class tour near the end of our session around 10:30. There's no better reminder of the reason for this meeting than that. We will try to wrap up ahead of time, but we may see some smiling faces in the background throughout our session. So please join me in welcoming Matthew Getsky to the stage.
Thank you, Chair Redmond. Welcome everyone to our session today here at the Ken Sealing Museum. So I'm Matthew Getsky, I'm the acting CAO for the region of Waterloo, and we're happy to bring a busy and full agenda to you today with great speakers lined up and lots of time for discussion at the table and questions as well. So the first part, I'll be inviting my region of Waterloo colleagues from the leadership team to the stage to provide a bit of opening local context about the services that we deliver. We'll share some of the reflections about the pressures that we face as we grow to a community of 1 million people. After that, we'll invite some our guest speakers from AMO, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, who have kindly prepared a presentation about their work on a social and economic prosperity review to explore a new fiscal framework for municipalities. Finally, we'll have some time at our tables to discuss what we've heard and to explore areas where we can better collaborate to ensure that we continue to deliver essential services to the region. With that, I'll invite our folks from the leadership team, Connie, Peter, Shuli, and Cheryl, to join me to the podium to talk to and Karen.
I'm not any of those important people. I'd just like to say our MPs have all arrived. Thank you very much. And MPP Harris has sent a representative as well, and I missed that on my notes. So welcome, everyone.
Yes, yes. We didn't rehearse, no. Thank you, CIO Getsky. I'm Connie McDonald. I'm the Chief Communications and Strategy Officer at the region. And before we dive into the discussion today, I'm pleased to be joined by my colleagues, Peter Sweeney, the Commissioner of Community Services, Dr. Shuli Wong, Chief Medical Officer of Health and Commissioner of Public Health and Paramedic Services, and Cheryl Braun, Acting Commissioner of Corporate Services and our CFO. We'll be providing some context about the essential services that the region provides and some of the very real pressures and challenges associated with growth. Our new strategic plan, Growing with Care, is our roadmap as we grow intentionally. It was informed by data and extensive dialogue with community, our partner agencies, and government. The 4 connected priorities outlined here act as a clear guide for the essential services our community needs now and into the future. My colleagues will now walk you through each of those.
Thanks, Connie. At the heart of our strategic plan is a pillar that we've called Homes for All, and it means just that everybody in this community has a right to a safe, secure, and affordable place to live. As you all know, we are in the middle of both a housing and a homelessness crisis, and it demands that we support our community across the continuum. The region has experienced an increase in chronic homelessness of 129% in the last 3 years. It's set to triple. These challenges are complex and require us to innovate and explore new fiscal tools and ways of working with our community, our partners, and our government. We also know that providing homes is more about building housing. It includes all of the services and infrastructure required to support thriving and building this community. The good news is we have a plan. We have a plan that was informed by this community, for this community, and in this community. It is a plan that is rooted in the experience of those who live this every single day. We've doubled our shelter capacity, and we've worked very closely in and with our community to build a plan to end chronic homelessness that we hope to see end chronic homelessness to a point of functional zero by 2030. We're also focusing on land readiness and unlocking regional-owned lands. And just last week, we announced two plans, the purchase of a new permanent shelter and lands in Breslau for future affordable housing. And as we tackle this crisis, we know we need to work together. Regional property taxes now cover 50% of our homelessness budget. That number was only 10% a few years ago. This is a great opportunity for us to partner together, and we look forward to the discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. So alongside building more homes and complete communities, we are actively working on climate-aligned growth. Reducing our greenhouse gas emissions and growing sustainably means building the critical infrastructure needed to support car alternative transportation options. So we've been able to achieve great success with the launch of ION, which just celebrated its 5th birthday this weekend, and building active transportation networks. Today, we deliver over 20 million transit trips per year. That's about 25% more than pre-pandemic. Stage 1 ION has resulted in also nearly $5 billion of investment along the line throughout the last decade, which means more active transportation trips, more homes in major transit station areas, and more trips by foot and more journeys across the region. It is vitally important that our rapid population growth does not come at the expense of our climate or the natural resources that we depend on. Climate change mitigation and adaptation are critical for every aspect of life, and these are a costly challenge too. A recent study completed by Queen's University estimates that under a business as usual scenario, physical damages associated with warming by 5 degrees Celsius by 2100 will cost Canada approximately $5.5 trillion. So municipalities have a really key role to play in there. FCM estimates that municipalities influence more than half of the nation's greenhouse gas emissions, and the community relies on our ability to mitigate and adapt to safeguard the vital services and the infrastructure that they use every single day. Providing low-carbon transit infrastructure leveraging innovative technologies for the community, and energy reduction means are all critical for mitigation. These pressures bring significant financial pressures for municipalities at the same time as we need to build out to grow. So these the networks that we're building, the service delivery that has to match the population growth, have to be transformed at the same time as they increase in scale. Our current example of this is, for example, for waste collection. So we have a new cart system that's going to be deployed, which will result in vastly improved services and efficiencies over the long term. But in the short term, it's still a fiscal pressure as we grow with the climate in mind.
The region of Waterloo provides essential services that are vital to health, safety, and well-being. If you need a paramedic, an immunization, a childcare spot, a glass of water, a book for school, a bus, a home, or you need some help making ends meet, the region is here for you. Making sure services and opportunities are truly responsive and accessible for everyone, equitably, is one of our 4 priorities. We know there are communities who have been traditionally underserved as a result of systemic discrimination. Breaking down barriers and meeting the needs of a rapidly growing population requires us to work differently. Some examples include our public health neighborhood nursing teams, our mobile vaccination bus, Indigenous and culturally informed childcare, and the WINS program. WINS stands for Working to Improve Neighborhood Safety. It is a peer outreach program where those with lived experience are hired and trained to safely dispose of improperly disposed syringes while providing education and building connections with community. We are also seeing increased pressures on our paramedic services. Offload delays and increased call volumes is a very real challenge for our teams. We have invested significantly in rapidly growing our services to keep up with a rapidly growing population and to make a reality new innovative programs in partnership with our health system partners, such as alternative destination clinics, to make the most of stressed resources. These models need support to maintain and scale, as they are a means to an equitable and fiscally sustainable future.
Being a resilient and future-ready organization is all about how we sustain and improve essential services in affordable ways as our community grows. It means leveraging every dollar to create additional value for the community, like the ION investment, leveraging billions in additional funding for the community. It also means creating a more human-centered delivery approach, powered by digital capabilities that are inclusive, sustainable, easy for users, and easy for staff to manage efficiently and affordably. All of our other priority areas in our strategic plan ultimately rely upon our success in this area. For example, to make sure our services are equitable requires us to invest in a diverse culture and staff team who are representative of the community and who can make progress toward meaningful reconciliation, equity, diversity, and inclusion. At the region, we take efficiency and quality of service very seriously. Our teams work on a large scale to work smarter for the whole community. This can be seen in our strong benchmarking performance against comparators in areas such as childcare, EMS, facilities operating costs, governance, and corporate management costs, to name a few. Over the past 5 years, we have realized upward of $40.5 million of operational efficiencies. A great example of this is reducing our need for administrative space by 41,000 square feet, which is saving us $1.2 million a year in leasing and operating costs, and deferring $100 million plus in tax dollars over the next 20 years. However, to continue innovating to save money requires investment, and we continue to experience growing costs of contracts, growing cybersecurity threats, and a very challenging job market. I'll now turn it over to our acting CFO, Cheryl Braun, to walk through some of the conversations that we've been having in preparation for our 2025 plan and budget. And in a moment, we'll be turning it over to our colleagues at AMO, who are here to explore this issue on a sectoral scale.
The region delivers a broad range of critical services to the community, as evidenced by its $1.5 billion operating budget. Some of these services are mandated to be delivered by municipalities on behalf of senior levels of government, so there is a shared responsibility to deliver these services to the community. As such, services such as public health, paramedic services, housing and homelessness, children's and senior services, and Ontario Works Administration are cost shared with the province and federal governments to varying degrees. Approximately a quarter of all regional revenue in the operating budget comes from senior levels of government, whereas the cost of these services accounts for approximately 40% of the region's total operating budget. These shortfalls are currently funded by property taxes, which one could argue is ill-suited as an income redistribution revenue tool. With respect to capital, the region provides and maintains critical infrastructure necessary to support a healthy and growing community. As evidenced by the region's $6.5 billion 10-year capital program, of which approximately $500 million is planned for 2024, these investments are significant. Assets in water, wastewater, roads, transit, paramedic services, waste management, housing and homelessness all require funding for both asset renewal and growth. Generally speaking, development charges are a calculation of the cost of growth divided by the amount of growth. However, the development charge regime is very complicated, and due to many arbitrary exclusions, exemptions, and discounts, growth does not pay for growth. For certain programs, these shortfalls can be partially funded by senior levels of government through funding programs such as the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program for transit. And again, in the absence of any other revenue tool, portions of property tax and user rate increases will go towards funding growth-related infrastructure. Turning to the projected 2025 operating position, both inflation and growing community needs are putting pressure on the region's operating budget. While the level of inflation is abating, there's still increased pressure on the operating budget for both service delivery and funding for capital cost escalation. Approximately 45% of the region's projected $77 million property tax increase in 2025 is needed to keep up with inflation and cost escalation. Additionally, the region will need to continue to implement service expansions that were approved to start partway through 2024 in services such as transit, paramedic services, housing, and homelessness. And because the region continues to grow at a remarkably fast pace, there is pressure to invest further into these services in 2025. This slide illustrates the need and cost of provincially and federally mandated services has outpaced the funding provided by senior levels of government. In 2019, which was pre-pandemic, property tax levy funding for cost-shared services was in the range of $104 million. Fast forward 5 years later in 2024, the level of funding for these services increased by approximately $84 million, or which is more than an 80% increase. In 2025, we project that with further investments that are required to support a growing community need, the level of investment could more than double 2019 levels at an estimated $216 million. And again, unlike provincial and federal income tax revenue, the property tax levy is a revenue tool ill-suited to perform an income redistribution function. So that brings us to the close of our staff presentation.
Our Growing with Care strategy is driving change and making a real impact on the lives of every single resident in Waterloo Region. Continuing on this path as we prepare to be 1 million ready will require new ways of working and new fiscal tools to help us secure the investment that's needed for a rapidly growing community. We take pride in being great partners and collaborators, which positions us well for what's to come, we hope. I'll hand it now back to Mathieu to introduce our next speaker guests.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much to the team for your time presenting today, and and just the time you put into the actual work every day of the year. So we'll move on to our next presentation, and I'll invite Lindsay Jones and Brian Rossborough from AMO to introduce their work.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the introduction. As Matthew said, I'm Brian Rossborough, Executive Director of the Association of Municipalities, and I'm with my colleague Lindsay Jones this morning, who's our Director of Policy. And I'm going to be very brief and quickly turn things over to Lindsay. I wanted to first thank you for the invitation. We're delighted to be here. For me, it's a bit of a homecoming. I had the privilege of working for Wilfrid Laurier University for 8 years between 2009 and 2018. So I have a very strong sense of this community, and in particular, a strong sense of the opportunity for growth and innovation here in Waterloo Region. So I think this is an important opportunity for us to be a part of this conversation as well. Lindsay is going to talk to you about the work we're doing around securing a social and economic review, prosperity review with the province. It's work underway. We haven't got a yes yet, but we've had tremendous support from our members. And we learned a lot of lessons from the last time we had this kind of review, which was back in 2008. At the time, I was the Director of Policy at AMO. And we learned a lot about how to have this kind of conversation with the government, and a lot of lessons that we'd like to bring to bear. That review resulted in the uploading of social assistance benefits and a portion of court security costs, which now save municipalities about $2 billion a year in Ontario. That's money you can invest in other priorities. And that's the kind of thing we're trying to achieve this time around as well. We also are aware that there are many conversations going on in the province where the sector is not at the table. And I think a good example of that is, there are current deliberations around the future of water and wastewater services in Peel, for example. That's not a discussion where the municipal sector is participating. And so this, and there are many, many other examples of conversations that are going on that should be part of a broader conversation about the future of Ontario's provincial municipal fiscal framework. Where do we find the money to invest in infrastructure of the future? What kind of conversation do we need to be having on a government-to-government basis that really sets us up well for social and economic prosperity? So for that, I'll stop talking and turn it over to Lindsay. Thanks.
Thanks, Brian. And again, thanks so much for the opportunity and come to speak to you today about something that is definitely a priority for the AMO board, but I think it's probably a priority for everybody in municipal government these days, which is how to pay for everything that is being asked of municipalities to support our residents, our communities, and our businesses. So on the next slide, as Brian mentioned, we've been working to secure a social and economic prosperity review with the provincial government. So back in 2008, the province and municipalities engaged in the Provincial Municipal Fiscal and Service Delivery Review to develop a shared vision to help rebalance roles, responsibilities, and finances. That, of course, resulted in the uploading of about $2 billion annually in municipal costs back to the province. So we believe that 15 years later, the time for another discussion about fiscal partnerships is long overdue. So this review that we have called on the province to undertake jointly with us is really about sitting down, taking a look at revenues, costs, and financial risks to put municipalities on a sustainable path to be able to invest in the infrastructure and services that are so critical to our communities. So on the next slide, I think it bears kind of zooming out to think about just how critical and how significant the municipal sector is to both the economy and the quality of life of Ontario. So we're a $64 billion a year sector, which is equivalent to roughly 1/3 of the annual provincial spending plan. And as a sector, we own and operate almost $500 billion worth of infrastructure for the benefit of the public, which of course is more than both the provincial and the federal governments. And most importantly, we provide the services that residents and businesses rely on most every day, from emergency services to long-term care, electricity, public health, and much more. So municipal investments are really what drive growth and build communities that make the province a great place to live and a great destination for people and investment. But on the next slide, the fiscal relationships and arrangements that underpin municipalities' ability to deliver these services and infrastructure is broken. So long-standing structural challenges have combined with growth pressures, economic factors, increasing social challenges, and provincial public policy decisions to push municipalities to the brink. So municipal revenues in the form of property taxes, user fees, and development charges do not grow with the economy or inflation. And most federal and provincial grants to municipalities, like the OMPF, also don't grow with inflation either. In 2022, the annual inflation rate was 6.8%. And while provincial and federal governments saw a surge in revenues, municipalities were left to contend with the rise in costs of labor and materials and skyrocketing interest rates with flatlined funding. On the next slide, looking a little bit more at those long-standing structural challenges, Ontario's municipalities find themselves in the curious position of actually subsidizing the province by about $4 billion each year. As a result of downloading in the 1990s, almost 1/3 of annual municipal spending in Ontario pays for services that everywhere else in the country are the responsibility of the province. So this includes social housing, emergency shelters, long-term care, public health, land ambulance, childcare, and social services. And while the province provides grants to cover some of these services, they don't come close to covering the actual costs. So in 2022, municipal expenditures in these areas outpaced provincial grants by $4 billion, and that's net of unconditional grants like the OMPF. So on the next slide, property taxes are not the answer in terms of trying to address this shortfall. Property taxpayers like seniors on fixed income and struggling small businesses just can't afford to underwrite the investments needed to solve the complex and growing social challenges that are being asked of them. The system was never designed to work this way, and the result that we see in our communities is unmet need with growing social and economic consequences. So as of 2022, property taxes in Ontario were already the second highest in the country. And in 2024, most municipalities across the province had to significantly increase property taxes to address a perfect storm of factors, including growth pressures, inflation, increasing social challenges, and provincial changes to development charges. On the next slide, that's why we think the time for a conversation about provincial municipal fiscal arrangements and the best way to pay for the foundations of Ontario's prosperity is long overdue. While municipalities take the heat for taxes that will fund our future prosperity, the province can and must do more. Failing to put municipalities on a fiscally sustainable path means failing to take action on the things that matter most to Ontarians, like addressing housing affordability and supporting growth. So AMO did some work in collaboration with the provincial treasurers, and we've taken a look at all of the capital plans over the next 10 years, and municipalities are planning to invest over $250 billion in infrastructure over the next 10 years, with around $100 billion of that related to growth. So we need to think long and hard about how we pay for that growth, who pays for it, and over what kind of a time period. Healthcare. It is the case that municipalities across Ontario spend billions of dollars every year, $3.3 billion in 2022, in healthcare, despite only receiving $1.8 billion in provincial grants. And what we've seen time and time again is that when resources and funding in public health, long-term care, and ambulance doesn't keep pace with the growing need, we see the results in our hospitals, in our doctors' waiting rooms, and in the health outcomes of our communities. Cost of living, a significant priority and issue for many Ontarians, is not going to be helped by just kind of continuing to put more pressure on the property tax base. As was alluded to by a number of the officials up here, the property tax base is not the way to fund income redistribution. It's not a progressive instrument. And finally, public safety is a critical and growing issue at the top of mind for many Ontarians. And municipal resources, of course, go to fund police. And the impacts that we see in our communities of inadequate approaches to mental health and addictions and homelessness are putting all of the resources and police budgets under strain. On the next slide. So, municipalities across the province believe that the time is right for a conversation where municipalities in the province come together to reestablish the stability and sustainability of municipal finances province-wide. Folks are familiar, of course, with the new deals that are currently underway with Toronto and Ottawa, and these are steps in the right direction that fundamentally acknowledge the unsustainable nature of current arrangements. But of course, as everybody in this room knows, these challenges go well beyond Toronto and Ottawa's borders and are felt in every community across Ontario. Over the course of the past few months, over 150 municipalities have called on the province to commit to a social and economic prosperity review. And in response to this call, it is definitely the case that the province made important one-time investments in municipal infrastructure that we saw in the 2024 budget, as well as helpful incremental increases in funding for supportive housing, mental health, and addiction services. But the problem is a lot deeper than these one-time investments can fix. Interestingly, opposition leaders get it. As municipalities heard in the various municipal conferences that took place across the province this spring, each of the three opposition leaders have committed to a new deal for municipalities if they're elected. And next slide. But of course, we can't wait another 2 years or 1 year to come to the table. We need to start discussions now to come up with near-term solutions to important issues like cost of living, housing affordability, healthcare, and public safety. So we're asking municipalities across the province to keep up the momentum, to reach out again to local MPPs, local businesses, healthcare and community partners to explain how important these discussions are to Ontario's economy and quality of life. AMO's got some tools online to be able to do that. We are asking the provincial government to commit to this review at the AMO conference. The conversation is long overdue, and while we know it'll take leadership and resources from the province and municipalities to do this important work, the benefits for stronger economic foundations, sustainable communities, and a better quality of life for all Ontarians are indisputable. Thanks so much.